Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Tuesdays with Mitch. I'm your host and fellow paralegal here at Proner and Proner, Emmeline. Every Tuesday, we sit down with you guys live with the expert himself, Mitchell Proner, a personal injury attorney with over 30 years of experience, to talk about interesting topics and possible questions that you, the viewers, might have. How are you, Mitchell?
I'm good. I'm good. Happy to have another episode and hopefully provide some good information for people out there looking to know their rights if they've been injured. And tonight we're going to be talking about Uber and taxis.
Yeah, we have a great topic for you guys. We're going to be talking about the differences between Uber accidents and taxi accidents. What are the differences in the state of New York? We're going to jump right into it. So, Mitchell, how does insurance work for taxi accidents in New York as opposed to Uber accidents?
So it's an interesting topic because it's changed quite a bit. So as people may know, there's yellow taxis, there's Ubers, there's Lyft, there's black cars, there's green cars, and they all have different rules and regulations, and typically they have different insurance coverage. So let's start off with taxis. Taxis have a minimum coverage required by law of 100, 300. 100, 300 means 100,000 per person with a maximum of 300,000 per accident. That means if there's one person involved in an accident, the limits are 100,000. But if there's four people in the taxi, they have to split a maximum of 300,000. So it's a maximum of 100 per person and 300,000 per accident. That doesn't mean that's the minimum. The minimum is zero. You might be in a taxi accident. If you can't prove you've sustained injuries that warrant payment, you're not getting anything. You don't get the 100 just because you had an accident. You have to sustain injuries. And in New York, in order to get money for pain and suffering, you have to have a serious injury as defined by statute, which comes in various categories by statute definition, section 5102 of the insurance law, you have to have either a fracture, significant scarring, death, dismemberment, 90 out of 180 days immediately following the accident to be completely disabled, a permanent consequential limitation of a system function, body, or organ, or a significant limitation of a system, body, or function. There's different categories. And a lawyer could better tell you whether or not you fit into one of those categories. If you sustained injuries and you're a passenger in a taxi, or if you've been hit as a pedestrian by a taxi, the liability limits, that's what pays you money at the end of a case, is a 100, 300 policy.
Okay, great. Now, how about what are the differences for an Uber accident? How does the insurance work for Uber accidents in New York?
Well, actually, in the city and the state, there are two different things. So, outside New York City, if the app is engaged and you have passengers, there is up to 1.25 million in coverage. That's $1,250,000 in coverage. But if you're an Uber driver and the app is not engaged and you don't have passengers, you only have the insurance on your vehicle that you purchased. And the minimum in New York State is a 50 policy, 25,000 per person, maximum of 50,000 per accident. But most Uber drivers carry 100, 300. Now, in New York City, because they have the law that requires vehicles for transit, commercial vehicles, livery vehicles, have a 100, 300 policy, Uber doesn't have to have the 1.25 million because it's exempted by New York City law. So it's only 100, 300 in New York City. So, for example, we represented an Uber driver who lived in the Bronx. But because his accident happened in Mamaroneck, we were able to get him over $1 million. Just because his accident happened in Westchester, the additional coverage was there. In the city, he would have gotten significantly less.
That's a pretty big difference. I'm gonna cut you off a little bit and I'm gonna have a big announcement for all of our viewers. Right now, as of last week, this show is also a podcast. So we started publishing last week. It comes out every Tuesday, just like our live show. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You could follow us under Proner and Proner, the same as all of our socials. And I do want to remind you guys that you guys are able to contact us. If you're in the live chat, you're able to ask us any questions or concerns that you might have. We're always here and happy to help. And it's easier if you don't have any time to physically watch. You could listen to us while doing any errands or anything at all. We're always here and happy to make this more accessible to the viewers, which is you. So, Mitchell, let's jump right back in. What should someone do if they're involved in an Uber or taxi accident as a passenger?
Okay, so there is additional coverage available under the policies. So I mentioned the 100-300 policy, which is 100,000 per person and a maximum of 300,000 per accident. The additional 1.25 that I referred to, that's can also be underinsured motorist coverage or supplemental underinsured motorist coverage. That's if another vehicle at fault didn't have adequate coverage. And that may be available as well. But there's additional coverage also available. Every vehicle in New York is required to have no fault coverage. No fault coverage is the insurance coverage that covers your medical bills, your lost earnings, and miscellaneous expenses. There's a limit of 50,000 total. Medical bills don't have a limit within that 50,000. Loss of earnings are 80% of your lost earnings up to $2,000 a month. And miscellaneous expenses are a limit of $25 a day. But all those bills will only get paid if you submit the claim within 30 days. You have to file a no-fault application to submit the claim. If you want to get your loss of earnings, if you have an employer, you need to have your employer verify your lost earnings on a no-fault application. If you're self-employed, you have to verify your own earnings with your tax records. You're going to need that if you're disabled from work. You don't get that money if you could keep working. But if you're disabled from work, you can get that no-fault payments, but you got to file it within 30 days of the loss incurred. If you have medical bills, you have to submit them to the no-fault carrier within 30 days. Otherwise, they could deny payment. Now, you might say, well, I got my own health insurance. Some health insurance requires reimbursement from a recovery from a personal injury claim. For example, Medicaid, Medicare, self-funded ERISA plans, which are health insurance typically provided by unions and other employers. You might have to pay that money back, but no fault, you don't have to pay back. But you got to file within 30 days. If you don't know how to file, you can typically, if you've sustained injuries, find an attorney that will help you file. And most attorneys, like Proner and Proner, my office, we don't charge to file for no fault. Actually, some attorneys charge you $500. It's listed right in their retainer agreement. We don't do that. They might take that 500 at the end of the case, but you're still paying money you don't have to pay. We don't charge to file no fault. And other attorneys say, no, it's legal. It's right in our retainer agreement. You have to read the retainer agreement. We don't have any hidden charges. Um, so it's best if you're injured in a taxi accident or an Uber accident or a Lyft accident to get in touch with an attorney right away. And you got to do your homework and get a reputable attorney. Otherwise, it can cost you money immediately and in the long run.
So again, if you guys missed that, find a reputable, honest attorney. Here at Proner and Proner, we basically take care of everything. You don't have to worry about anything except continuing your medical treatment and being available to us when we need you. Is that right, Mitchell?
Yeah, when we typically need you is we need to find out about your treatment. We need to find out about your lost earnings so we can present your claim. And if we can't find you, we don't know you what doctors you're going to. It's going to be more difficult for us. Believe it or not, sometimes we can't find our clients. I've even had to hire investigators to find them, and sometimes we find them and they're in other countries, and that's just part of the profession. Another time we might need you is if there's depositions, and that's where you have to give sworn testimony, and we prepare you beforehand. And other times we might need you, of course, if the case goes to trial. And I try cases. I've been trying cases for over 30 years, and uh, I still find it challenging but enjoyable because, fortunately, um, I've had tremendous success over the years, and it's always fun winning.
So, okay, now let's jump right back into our questions. We spoke about passengers and we spoke about potential drivers who are in the Ubers and taxis. Now, how about pedestrians? Do taxi and Uber insurance policies also cover pedestrians who are hit?
They do carry pedestrians with the same limits. Pedestrians have no fault up to $50,000, 80% of your lost earnings up to $2,000 a month, $25 miscellaneous expenses. Uh, Additionally, the miscellaneous expenses, you got to prove that too. You can't just say, oh, I paid a housekeeper. That housekeeper could be your sister or your aunt, but you got to get a receipt and proof of payment. And then you're entitled to it. If you take cabs, you need your doctor to write a note that you couldn't take public transportation because of the injuries you sustained, and you have to submit it within 30 days. That's to get reimbursed. Um, but that'll come from the Uber or the cab that hit you if you're a pedestrian. There's the additional 100, 300, 100,000, $300,000 coverage in the city, or up to 1.25 million if it's outside the city, and that coverage is available if you're a pedestrian. So it's the same limits, but you got to file your no fault within 30 days. And sometimes um, claims have short statutes where it might be some municipal involvement where it's a year and 90 days and a 90-day notice of claim requirement. But that's not typically the Uber driver. Uber drivers typically have 3 years to file suit. But if you've sustained injuries, you're better off having an attorney document your damages as soon as possible.
Okay, great. So now, before continuing on with the questions, I do want to talk about an event that Mitchell attended last week with the National Coalition of Motorcyclists. If you guys have been in tune, then you know that a couple weeks ago, Mitchell was also outside of the country, but he went again for another event here nationally. How about you tell us a little bit more of what you did in the National Coalition of Motorcyclists, Mitchell?
So uh, I think just about every month um, I'm traveling somewhere to speak. And some months it's 2 or 3 times a month that I'm speaking somewhere. I've lectured to attorney groups across the United States. I probably lectured to attorneys in I can't say 50 states because I know offhand I've never been to Alaska. Um, I've been to Hawaii, lectured there, California, Arizona, New Mexico. Anyway, probably over 40 states I've lectured. Um, and But this lecture wasn't to attorneys. This was to a biker group. I'm a motorcyclist. Um, I've been riding since I was a kid, mini bikes, and it's always been a part of my life. And actually, interestingly, on the subject tonight, I was hit by a taxi cab on my motorcycle. Uh, Sustained a broken wrist, a broken ankle, and 7 bones in my back in the early '90s, and I still ride. But I was hit by a cab that ran a red light, and it can happen to anybody. It happened to me. This time, I was in Biloxi, Mississippi last weekend at the National Coalition Motorcycles event, and I spoke to attorneys from all across the United States. Um, and I talked about their civil rights. I'm not a criminal attorney, I only do civil actions, typically on behalf of accident victims. And unfortunately, motorcyclists oftentimes are not seen, and people don't always obey the traffic rules, and they can injure anybody. And a lot of times on a motorcycle, your injuries could be quite significant. So I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, which I went to from New York. There's no direct flights. Took 2 flights through Atlanta to get there. Lectured. Biloxi is famous for uh, casinos, which I did not know. And actually, well, some people love casinos. Being there for a lecture, I found it a little bit annoying because the whole time you're walking around the hotel, you're ding, 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 and it's. But then they have these big ballrooms, and it was filled with motorcyclists from around the United States, and I lectured, and I came back and had Mother's Day with my wife, and that's what I did this past weekend. So it was I guess on top of it all, I like speaking. It was enjoyable. What one of the reasons I like speaking to bikers is when you speak to a jury, they sit there pretty stoically, and usually you don't know how they're thinking about what you're saying until you get the verdict. And fortunately, I haven't lost a case in years. And if you ask me the last time I tried a case, it was just a couple months ago, and before that, a couple months before that, and a couple months before that, I do try cases, but I can't. In the entire time, Evelyn, you've been in my office. You haven't seen me lose a case, have you?
Absolutely not.
No,
Literally.
I have lost cases. You can't guarantee the outcome. I have lost cases. I don't want to pretend every case I go win, but I can't recall the last time I lost one. But that being said, with Jersey, you never know what they're thinking. But with bikers, I have found, speaking to large groups of bikers for over 30 years, if I'm doing well, I'll get a standing ovation at the end. But if I'm boring them, they might heckle me, which, which makes it an honest reaction. I enjoy that.
It is, and it kind of gives you a good idea whether you're doing a good job or whether you're not doing a good job. Sometimes I feel like some people could try to be a little bit too nice, but it's sometimes nice to hear how it is.
Yeah. And then I'm speaking again in Connecticut, uh, in on the 24th, and then I believe in Brooklyn on the 31st, and then in Europe in June, and then San Francisco in July. So I get around. I was just looking at my calendar. Anyway, that's what I
Okay,
do.
let's jump right back into the questions. I hope it's nice for you guys to understand a little bit more of the kind of person that Mitchell is and a lot of the things that he does get involved with. And they're not just having anyone speak at these events. I also want to stress this. You have to be a reputable attorney and know what you're talking about to be speaking all over the country and worldwide. So I want to jump right back into the question. So Mitchell, what happens in cases where another at fault driver crashes into an Uber or taxi and the driver is the injured party? Is this a case or can this be a case?
Okay, so if you hit an Uber or a truck or a brick wall and you're at fault, it's not going to be a case. You're still going to get your no fault in New York. You get your medical bills paid and your lost earnings up to $2,000 a month, but you're not going to get money for your pain and suffering if you're 100% at fault. If there's a division of fault. Maybe you're 80% of fault. The Uber's 20%. You're still entitled to compensation. If it's 50-50, you're entitled to compensation. If it's 30-70, it's got to add up to 100 when dividing the fault. Unless there's multiple vehicles, then it could be 30, 40, whatever. But if you're 100% at fault, you're not getting paid for your pain and suffering. If it's comparative fault, there's a division between who's at fault, you're entitled to money. If you're in the Uber and you're injured and another vehicle's at fault, the Uber's insurance can still cover you with the underinsured motorist coverage, which can be up to $1.25 million, even if the other vehicle's at fault. Typically, let's suppose the Uber driver's at fault. If the app isn't on, it's not engaged, you don't have passengers, there's typically less coverage. So the circumstances by which you might be entitled to compensation and how much can change depending on who's at fault, whether the app is active, whether or not the driver has passengers that came through the app, and the extent of your injuries. And of course, the attorney representing you can certainly change how much money you're entitled to. I find all the time attorneys that say they do divorces and criminal and closings and estates and also do personal injury. I find it extremely challenging just to do personal injury alone. And when I travel around the world meeting with other attorneys talking about personal injury cases, how to represent plaintiffs, there's no way I could get the amount of knowledge that I do from sharing information with other attorneys if I was trying to do everything. It's like any profession. If a guy is says they are a doctor and they do everything, they take out splinters, and you don't want to go to that guy for neurosurgery. You want a guy who's doing neurosurgery every day, that's got special training in that area. And I think being a plaintiff's personal injury attorney is the same thing.
That makes a great point. Honestly, you don't want someone that's always jumping around. This is all you work on, personal injury. So if you want a specialized attorney that knows the law inside and out, if you've had an accident, if you know anyone who's had an accident, for any future reference, if you just want to be informed about the law and any questions that could happen, because an accident can happen to anyone at any point in time. So it's always useful information for you guys to know. I do want to remind you guys that you should follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for our show that's newly on podcast streaming services, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us under Proner and Proner. Also follow all of our social media under Proner and Proner as well, so you never miss a video. And feel free to contact us at any time, 1-800-321-1234. We're always here, happy to help and answer any questions. And if you're having a hard time with your attorney or you just had a personal injury accident, please give us a call. We'd be happy to help you and obtain more information and hopefully give you more insight on how we can help you. So Mitchell, do you have any last words?
Yeah, thank you for everybody for listening, and thank you to my beautiful and talented paralegal, Emily. Thanks so much for helping with the program.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap up quickly with a short video of Mitchell about a big case he has, is the Costa Concordia case. So we hope you guys enjoy this short video, and thank you guys for watching.
I've had a lot of big cases in the office. The biggest one would be the Costa Concordia shipwreck. It was the largest shipwreck since the Titanic. I was lead counsel representing victims from all over the world. We had clients from Asia, from South America, North America, and mainly from Europe, as the shipwreck took place in Italy. The lawsuit was brought in Florida. and it was a fight. We brought it in state court in Florida, and the attorneys moved to have the case moved to federal court in Florida, and then moved to have it in Italy. We managed to win the motions, keep the case in Florida, and during the fight there was a mediation, and we came up with a settlement, which was confidential, but we obtained compensation for all the victims, from the unfortunate death cases to people that walked off the boat with just psychological trauma. But it was a rewarding case, not just monetarily, but as an experience in my life, handling an international litigation and ultimately coming out successful. The Costa Concordia shipwreck. It was quite a case.